is 6 seconds after the hour. Seiko, leader in world timing.
This is the Satellite News Channel. Give us 18 minutes, we'll give you the world.
It is on the top of the hour. Good evening. I'm Dan Breinholt, and here's what's happening. The U.S. is throwing fresh paratroopers and helicopter gunships into the fight for Grenada, now 2 days old. The reason, stiff resistance by Cuban and Grenadian troops. Defense Secretary Caspar Weinberger says American troops have been drawn into house-to-house fighting in Grenada's capital. At least 30 Cubans are reported killed in today's fighting. The American death toll stands at 6. Still, Weinberger says American GIs will be coming home soon.
We want to withdraw as many of our troops as we possibly can and want to get them completely out just as soon as possible. And while I know that everybody wants a precise date and hour when that will happen, why we're obviously going to have to wait until it is these various conditions are established. But I think that personally it will be possible for some of the troops to start coming out very soon. And if we can get this organization of the new government underway with these with the countries that asked us in, then it can go even faster.
U.S. forces have captured more than 600 Cuban troops, and at this hour, Weinberger says American students at the St. George's Medical College have been removed from the campus and are reported safe. And the first evacuees from Grenada have been arriving in Charleston, South Carolina. As I said, the first evacuees from Grenada say that they are glad to be back on U.S. soil tonight. 59 Americans and 2 British citizens touched down at Charleston Air Force Base late this afternoon. Another plane load is expected later tonight. Many of the evacuees were medical students studying on the Caribbean island. They said the worst part of the ordeal who engaged the multinational force.
Unable to resist the overwhelming military superiority of the U.S. forces, even when losing the battle and sacrificing themselves, could still inflict a costly moral defeat on the United States.
Castro said he will not reinforce Cuban forces already on Grenada, and he added that the estimated 700 Cubans on Grenada will not surrender under any circumstances to U.S. troops. The Cuban government has also sent a 10-point protest note to the United States. Hundreds marched in Detroit, Boston, and Minneapolis last night to protest the invasion of Grenada, and 400 more gathered in San Francisco, where speakers said the invasion was propaganda designed to get Lebanon off the front page. Some protesters seem to agree with that point.
I'm horrified. I'm scared. I don't know why they did it. It's a little country. There's no room for 2,000 Marines.
And Reagan is using this as a means of distracting attention from Lebanon. I think Reagan really wants to show the Western Hemisphere that we're serious about keeping control of everything.
Across the bay in Berkeley, more than 1,000 people marched through the streets in one of the biggest demonstrations since the Vietnam War. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 8.6.4 today to close at 1,243.8. Volume was active with over 79 million shares changing hands. For more business news, here's Business Week correspondent Jeff Simmons.
Well, if you're planning a trip by bus anytime soon, you might have to change your plans. Workers at Greyhound Bus Lines have said no to the bus company's latest contract offer, and they've authorized their union to call a strike. Well, as expected, Digital Equipment reported a significant drop in its fiscal first quarter earnings. Sales were up, but well below expectations. Digital said its earnings dropped to 28 cents a share. That's down from $1.02. But automakers continue to turn out good news. Domestic auto sales were up over 40% for the largest automakers in the latest selling period compared to a year ago. Japan has apparently turned down a White House request to voluntarily limit 1984 exports to the United States to 1.8 million cars. But there is a good chance of a compromise. The Japanese are said to be willing to accept a 1.9 million car limit. Our next business report on the Satellite News Channel in 30 minutes. For Business Week, I'm Jeff Simmons.
Over 3 days have passed since a suicide attack at the U.S. compound in Beirut, and still the body count rises. 219 servicemen are now confirmed dead. Vice President George Bush saw the devastation for himself and vowed the U.S. would not be pushed around by what he calls terrorist cowards. We get more from SNC's Susan Hack.
The vice president's visit was unannounced and came amidst massive security conditions. Yesterday, the Marines spotted 3 trucks laden with explosives circling neighborhoods near the airport. The trucks were not apprehended, and the Marine spokesman, Major Robert Jordan, says the threat of a second bombing is still there. Recovery efforts continued throughout the day at the compound, where Marines, Italian soldiers from the multinational force, and Lebanese Red Cross workers continued to sift through the debris. Several bodies were found Wednesday, and all those missing are now presumed dead. The Marines have begun compiling a new list of the dead and missing. All personnel records were destroyed in the blast. All the Marines on the base have been told to write home immediately, and 2 phone lines have been set up to allow them to phone their families. Susan Hack, Satellite News Channel, Beirut.
The Pentagon agreed today to make public a list of names of those U.S. servicemen who escaped harm in Sunday's Beirut bombing. The move follows intense pressure from worried parents all over the country. There's been heated debate in Washington about whether to release such a list. One Marine spokesman said that while the list gives comfort to those who find the names of their loved ones, it just creates more worries for those who don't. The Pentagon, meantime, has set up a hotline for relatives of the Marines peacekeepers. If you have a relative stationed in Beirut, you can call the number. The number is 202-694-1492 through 202-694-1495. Those numbers once again, 202-694-1492, 202-694-1495. The Pentagon will release information only to family members. U.S. military action in the Middle East and Caribbean have boosted interest in the Marine Corps. The man in charge of the Marine Enlistment Office in Chicago says more people are trying to sign up.
Sergeant Major handles the re-enlistment program here in the RS, and he's gotten 30 to 40 phone calls in just the last 2 days.
And he says even many ex-Marines are trying to get another tour of duty. The conglomerate that owns Transworld Airlines has voted to spin off the troubled carrier into a separate company. Transworld Corporation has been making more money with its other interests than with TWA, and company directors decided today that the spin-off would not hurt TWA and could possibly help. The move would not affect company demands for $190 million in concessions from its workers. The plan will be presented to stockholders at a meeting in late December, and if approved, TWA would become a separate company on February 1st. You're watching SNC 8 minutes after the hour. Let's check out weather now with meteorologist Arnie Rosen.
This weather report is brought to you by Quaker Oats.
Good evening, everyone. Well, the calendar was turned back on the West Coast a good 2 months. You're not going to believe it. We had unbelievably mild temperatures. Indian summer once again throughout the plains, right in through the Southwest. 81 degrees today for a daytime high. Up near Billings, Montana, it reached 80 degrees in South Dakota as well as Nebraska. And warming temperatures with that Santa Ana wind blowing out of the north and east sent temperatures right along the coastline of California near the 90-degree mark. 94 for a high this afternoon out at L.A., and it was also over the 90-degree mark once again down at San Diego. The East Coast, well, a little bit of winter in the air. That northwesterly breeze was kind of unstable. Some snow flurries being reported up in the higher elevations of northern New England at this time, and some scattered showers now going on from about central New York right down through West Virginia. Forecast map coming up for this Thursday morning does show that the East Coast, we will have a little bit of cloudiness, instability left over, maybe a passing shower, but the trend of the day will be for dry, cooler weather to work in. High pressure building in that drier weather from the Great Lakes. But from the Mississippi Valley smack out to the West Coast, plenty of sunshine, and temperatures one more day will go up, I'd say, a good 20 or 30 degrees above what they should be. Check those temperatures out right now. We're expecting 80-degree readings, again, from about eastern Montana down through about Kansas and Nebraska. Also 80 degrees plus with a few 90s across southern California. The cool spot in the nation, again, in the Pacific Northwest and the Northeast, with mainly 40s and 50s coming into view. And as we head into Friday, we will also see that it will stay pretty nice across much of the Ohio Valley and much of the West Coast, except for some cooling up in the extreme northern plains. We'll check it again in 18 right here on SNC.
Years ago, the Cuban Missile Crisis was dominating White House meetings. Today, secret White House tape recordings made at that time are being made public. Dan Ray of Regional Associate WBZ in Boston reports.
Video cassettes and printed transcripts released at the JFK Presidential Library this morning were of 2 White House meetings on October 16, 1962. the day the president was first told of offensive Soviet missiles on the island of Cuba. The crisis actually lasted for 2 weeks, and today's release covers only the initial meetings between the president and his top advisors. The first reports of the Russian missiles raised more questions than they answered. A persistent cloud cover over the island limited the quality of the first aerial reconnaissance photographs, but the discussion of option among the president and his men was anything but limited. The missile crisis captured the attention of the world for the balance of October 1962. President Kennedy spoke to the American public and the world.
We have no wish to war with the Soviet Union, for we are a peaceful people who desire to live in peace with all other peoples. But it is difficult to settle or even discuss these problems in an atmosphere of intimidation.
That report from Dan Ray. Well, President Reagan fired 3 members of the Civil Rights Commission yesterday. That move has angered civil rights organizations and several members of Congress. All 3 commissioners were outspoken critics of the administration policies. They disagreed with the president over the most effective ways to put an end to racial discrimination.
They want ideologically compatible people who will in fact tell the public that the president's civil rights record is all good when it's not, and that enforcement is going on when it isn't.
I think what President Reagan is doing to that wonderful Civil Rights Commission is just tragic. Nothing again will ever reach the stature and prestige of the United States Commission on Civil Rights after this attempt of his to scuttle it.
I believe that the Congress ought to appoint its own Civil Rights Commission.
Senate and House liberals will try to recreate the U.S. Commission as a congressional agency. Its members are presently appointed by the president. Tonight we bring you a story of forced labor. 2 retarded men forced to work on a Michigan dairy farm for more than 11 years, getting only $10 stipend on Christmas and Easter. The Justice Department is charging the farm owners, Ike and Margarita Kozeminski, with involuntary servitude. FBI reports claim that Kozeminski's made the retarded men work 17 hours a day, sometimes in bad weather, without adequate clothing. The workers lived in trailers with no running water and no toilet facilities. They were also seen eating moldy bread and rotten meat. The county sheriff's office took the workers from their trailer homes last summer. They have now been placed in foster homes. 14 now past the hour. We've got sports here, and here to tell you about that is Stan Wood. Stan?
Thank you very much, Dan. Well, it's awards time in baseball, and the Major League All-Star game or All-Star team has been announced, and let's quickly run down it for you, if I may. At first base was Eddie Murray from the Baltimore Orioles. The second baseman was Lou Whitaker from the Detroit Tigers. The shortstop is a man many people feel may be the most valuable player in the American League this year, Cal Ripken Jr. from the Birds. The third baseman, Mike Schmidt from the Philadelphia Phillies. In the outfield, a lot of size and power out there. Dale Murphy from the Atlanta Braves. Andre Dawson from the Montreal Expos, and Big Jimmy Rice from the Boston Red Sox is also in the outfield. Lance Parrish will be the catcher from the Detroit Tigers. The pitching staff, Lamar Hoyt, the big right-hander from the Chicago White Sox. Left-hander, Scotty McGregor from the world champion Baltimore Orioles. Dan Quisenberry will be the relief pitcher, and the designated hitter was Greg Luzinski from the Chicago White Sox. Yesterday, Lamar Hoyt of the White Sox was named the American League Cy Young Award winner, and he won 25 games on the year, and he wants to thank his teammates for a lot of his success.
Well, I'm happy about it. I feel like it was a total team effort the whole season. They bailed me out a lot of times when I was giving up some runs. They scored a lot of runs, and a lot of times they played excellent defense behind me when I was having a good game. So it was just a total team effort the whole way, I feel like, and it's just a tribute to all the people that played with me all season long.
Let's quickly run down the National Hockey League scores from this evening. It was Detroit over Buffalo 6-5 in overtime. Winnipeg beat the New York Rangers 7-5. New Jersey 2-0 over, or Washington make that 2-0 over New Jersey. Toronto 8-3 over Edmonton, and St. Louis and Calgary 3-3 in the second. We'll be back with more sports in 30 minutes.
This is the Satellite News Channel. All news, all the time.
It is now 17 past the hour. I'm Dan Breinholt. Here are some of the stories we're covering. Vice President George Bush is back in the U.S. after visiting the Marines in Beirut. Top Israeli leaders say they have evidence that Syria was behind the Beirut bombings. And some English scientists say they've discovered a new, safe method for storing nuclear waste. Also ahead of the next 18 minutes, a look at business and a weather forecast. But first, our top story. There's word from Havana tonight that Cuban forces on Grenada have stopped fighting. Reports carried on Havana radio say the last Cuban troops died rather than surrender. But while the Cuban forces may have ended their resistance, Grenadian troops have not. Fighting is reported near the capital of St. George's. The Pentagon now says 6 American soldiers have been killed since yesterday's invasion. The Associated Press reports that 33 American soldiers have been wounded while 8 are now missing. Meanwhile, planes carrying American citizens and other evacuees are arriving in this country. Submarines are on the island of Barbados, from which troops were dispatched yesterday, and these are the only available pictures of the situation so far. President Reagan says he ordered yesterday's invasion of Grenada largely to protect some 1,000 Americans there in light of last week's military coup. The Secretary General of the UN Security Council tonight warned against an escalation of military actions in Grenada. Without naming the U.S. or its 6 Caribbean allies, Javier Perez de Cuellar urged the parties involved to conform with the United Nations Charter. Late last night, the Security Council met an emergency session to deal with the Grenada issue. The Grenadian deputy representative has called on the council to condemn the U.S. invasion, saying it has cost hundreds of civilian lives. The council will resume debate on the question later tonight. From Moscow, the official Soviet news agency TASS has accused the U.S. of bandit-style armed intervention in Grenada. In a commentary, TASS said President Reagan was personally responsible for this, quote, criminal action. As of yet, there is no formal protest from the Kremlin, but at the U.S. Embassy at Moscow, Soviet officials said they considered the action illegal. The reaction from America's allies has been almost as critical. From London, here's SNC's Linda Albin.
America's invasion of Grenada has brought a flurry of condemnation in both the British press and from politicians. In Parliament yesterday, Prime Minister Thatcher's government came under fire for not being tough enough.
Once again, Mrs. Thatcher failed to use her influence on President Reagan to get him to take some notice of what she did.
Grenada is a Commonwealth country, and Mrs. Thatcher failed to convince the opposition that she'd done her best in trying to dissuade President Reagan from taking military action.
We communicated to the United States our very considerable doubts which Her Majesty's government had about initiating action, and asked them to weigh carefully several points before taking any irrevocable decision to act.
The House of Commons continues its debate today. Mrs. Thatcher will continue to distance herself from President Reagan, an ally now perceived as a dangerous and trigger-happy cowboy. Linda Albin, Satellite News Channel, London.
Grenada has taken its outrage over the U.S. invasion to yet another diplomatic body, and SNC's Andy Gassmeyer reports on today's special session of the Organization of American States.
In a bitter, impassioned speech, Ian Jacobs told the OAS member nations that there is no justification whatsoever for the U.S. invasion of Grenada, that American claims that the invasion was undertaken to protect U.S. citizens on the island is a lie.
It's very clear that this smokescreen of danger to American citizens was a complete fabrication.
Referring to the invasion as, quote, this flagrant violation of international law, Jacobs said none of us can accept what has taken place in Grenada.
Blood will drip from their fingers when the truth comes out of what is taking place in Grenada. It is an international outrage that none of us can tolerate or accept, Mr. President. A small, poor country of 110,000 people has been invaded by a country of 220 million people.
Jacobs then asked the OAS to condemn the invasion and call for an immediate withdrawal of all foreign forces from Grenada. Andy Gassmeyer, Satellite News Channel, Washington.
You're watching the Satellite News Channel, back with more news and a look at weather right after this. Stay with us. Vice President George Bush met at Beirut today with Lebanese President Amin Jamal. Bush reportedly promised continued U.S. support for the Jamal government. Earlier, the vice president toured the ruins of the Marine base where at last count, 219 Americans died in Sunday's suicide bombing. Bush commented on what he saw.
I hadn't expected this much destruction. I mean, you'd heard it, you read it, but until you see it, and see the size of those reinforcing steel bars. And then I guess it's the horror, just the cowardly horror, you know, of what happened, what somebody did.
Before Bush arrived, the Marines again came under sniper fire. No casualties reported. The search continues for the in the rubble of the barracks. The death toll is expected to rise. Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir today accused Syria of orchestrating Sunday's deadly attack on U.S. and French military headquarters in Beirut. Shamir is quoted as saying that Israel knows Syria was behind the bombings and that the terrorists acted under Soviet patronage. He did not go into detail to explain how the Israelis reached this conclusion. Shamir also praised President Reagan for refusing to withdraw the American peacekeepers. He believes their removal would give Syria free rein to take over Lebanon completely. Pope John Paul II said today that the recent events in Lebanon and Grenada call for intense prayer. He told 80,000 people at St. Peter's Square that the bombing attacks in Lebanon and the U.S. invasion of Grenada caused him anguish and profound concern. Pope said these crises could bring on graver tensions and lead to a possible war. In Rome, the Jordanian ambassador to Italy came under attack today. He and his driver were seriously wounded when two unidentified gunmen shot them as they were leaving the embassy. Tom Brown has more details.
The attack came as the ambassador and his driver passed a residential square near the Jordanian embassy. Mr. Toucan was rushed to a nearby hospital with bullet wounds in the shoulder, one hand, and both feet. His driver also suffered bullet wounds, but so far no details of his condition have been released. Police, well aware of the incidence of such attacks in the city of Rome, cordoned off the area and began trying to find any clue which would lead to the prosecution of the men responsible. Two people, believed to be Jordanian, have been arrested in possession of firearms. In the confusion, police mistakenly seized two bodyguards as suspects in the attack. The ambassador's car was hit by a hail of bullets, which pierced the vehicle in several places. Each of the bullet holes has been carefully detailed, and fingerprint technicians spent hours examining the car looking for evidence. The attack in Rome follows on from the shooting and wounding of the Jordanian ambassador to India in New Delhi on Tuesday.
That report from Tom Brown. In England, Royal Prince William is gearing up for a fairy tale birthday. John Doyle reports a group of authors are helping to craft his fantasy.
It's what budding authors dream about, getting their efforts published and royal recognition. The Princess was given an early edition of Stories for a Prince, the work of the 14 lucky winners selected from 8,000 entries. Sponsored by their families, the young authors have already raised £50,000 for the blind. The stories range from traditional fairy tales to current social problems. The book will be published next month, just in time for Prince William's Christmas stocking.
John Doyle reporting. Well, there is now a glut of doctors, and that may spell disaster for the American medical establishment. That word comes from Dr. Robert Petersdorf, who criticized medical schools in the latest New England Journal of Medicine. He says there are too many new medical schools of questionable quality, and those schools are turning out too many specialists in competition with each other. He said doctors should quit training their own competition. That is what was eating the medical establishment alive. The number of medical students has doubled since the 1960s. It is now 27 minutes after the hour. Time now for a quick check on weather with Arnie Rosen. Arnie?
Thanks a lot, Dan. And Thursday will shape up just great on the West Coast. Plenty of sunshine expected. Our forecast map will allow those bright skies from the California coastline right through the Central Plains. Again, temperatures will run well above what they should be for this time of October. This cool front you see here will cool things off across the northern tier of states during the next 48 hours. But during the day tomorrow, just some scattered showers for the Pacific Northwest, other showers southern Arizona and New Mexico. Out on the East Coast, that's where the chill will be in the air, especially for New England, with scattered flurries perhaps in the higher elevations. The lower elevations, just a few scattered rain showers. The southeast, plenty of sunshine expected. Lows tonight, a quick look. We'll have 30s across much of the northern tier of states. The warm spot will be Florida, southern Texas, and interior California with 50s and 60s. More detailed weather in a few minutes.